Our discussion now. Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from California, a member of the Judiciary Committee and a current candidate for president, and Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat from Maryland. He is on the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight Committee, and the House Rules Committee. Congressman Swalwell, let me start with you with your reaction generally to the report, what you've been able to read of it today, and to the question that will be faced in your Judiciary Committee, the question of impeachment.
Good evening, Lawrence. Hey, Jamie. How's it going? Lawrence, first, I think and foremost, this has to be about the future of election security. We now know that the Russians interfered. We need a president to condemn that. And just because a prior Congress never imagined that someone would conduct themselves the way that the president and his campaign did, doesn't mean that we should welcome this type of behavior in upcoming elections. So there's a duty to put in place laws to prohibit so much of the conduct that we saw. Also, I don't think Attorney General Barr can remain as Attorney General. He can either be the president's lawyer or America's lawyer. He has chosen to work for the president. I believe he should resign immediately. And as it relates to our duty in Congress, yes, a roadmap has been laid out for the president to be held accountable. I think the first waypoint is to bring Bob Mueller before our committee, which we're going to do very soon, and hear from him.
Congressman Raskin, is there really any point to hearing from Attorney General Barr in a hearing? Chairman Nadler wants to schedule that hearing before the Mueller hearing.
That's an interesting question. He certainly has a lot to account for in terms of the last 3 weeks of a propaganda rollout of the report, which completely stripped him of any credibility as Attorney General of the United States. And my friend Eric Swalwell is calling for his resignation. It seems like he's already resigned in some sense. He's no longer acting as the chief law enforcement official for the country. He's acting more like a consigliere and propagandist for the Trump administration. So I'm much more eager to hear from the special counsel, from Mr. Mueller, than I am from the Attorney General at this point. We've heard a lot from him over the last few weeks.
Well, let's hear from the Senate for a second. This is Senator Kamala Harris earlier tonight on this network.
I think that there's definitely a conversation to be had on that subject, but first I want to hear from Bob Mueller and really understand what exactly is the evidence that supports the summary that we have been given today.
Congressman Swalwell, she was talking about impeachment there. Definitely a conversation to be had. That conversation apparently will be had in the presidential campaign. She's one of your rivals for the Democratic nomination. Do you expect it to become a campaign issue for Democrats?
Well, it's an issue for our country, Lawrence, because what we do now will set the standard for future presidents. So that could be Ms. Harris, that could be myself, that could be so many of us. And that's really what we have to weigh is do we want to tolerate what Donald Trump has done, or are we willing to say that no president should conduct themselves this way? And then there's also just national security implications here. And that's why the Intelligence Committee should also see the full unredacted report, because Russia did interfere. They did work with the Trump campaign. We need to know the methods that they used to make sure that as all of us go into this 2020 election, even in the primary, that Russia is not savaging the field and, again, taking away our freedom to choose at the ballot box.
Congressman Raskin, what do you think the Judiciary Committee's most important focus should be in studying the Mueller report?
Well, I think, well, first of all, we want to give the special counsel Mueller the opportunity to state what I think is completely pervasive in his report, which is that the ball is in Congress's court. It's up to Congress to decide. He didn't kick it upstairs to the Attorney General to declare that there was no obstruction. On the contrary, he laid out 10 episodes of attempted obstruction or obstruction by the president and basically said, Congress, you go and do your job right now. And so we'd like to hear him say that, I think. But look, the global backdrop here is important. There is rising authoritarianism around the world. There's lots of efforts to interfere with people's democratic elections and human rights. And Russia interfered in our election. And we can't have countries interfering in each other's elections. We really need some kind of international treaty on that. But we also need to fortify our own state electoral systems because we have a very vulnerable and decentralized electoral system with 51 different election processes and boards, really thousands across the country. And we've got to make sure that we have a real fair fair election and we defend people's voting rights against voter purges and all of the tricks that we saw in 2018 in Georgia, in Kansas, in Texas, and North Carolina, all over the country. But we also have to strengthen our cyber defenses against attack from abroad and from bad actors at home, too.
Congressman Swalwell, the report is almost like two reports, one to the Intelligence Committee that you serve on and one to the Judiciary Committee that you serve on. Judiciary, it seems to me, will be concentrating on the obstruction of justice, whereas the Intelligence Committee will be concentrating almost entirely on part one, which is what the Russians actually did during the campaign, what they hoped to do, what they achieved, how they did it, including the way they infiltrated campaign activities on the ground in the United States, specific examples of such things happening in Florida and elsewhere. Which of those, can you say which of those is more important?
Well, to me, the security of upcoming elections is the most important thing. We can go back to the past only if it's informing us about what we're going to do in the future. I don't think anyone wants to relitigate the 2016 election, but we do need to know who they worked with. We need to know how they did it. We need Republicans to join us and acknowledge that they did it. It's time for the president to lead and do that. But, Lawrence, we also need to make new laws that will make sure if any campaign is by a foreign adversary, there's a duty on them to tell the FBI. I wrote legislation called Duty to Report. It would put that burden on a federal candidate. And I don't think any of us want to see this conduct carry out again.
Yeah, I think, Congressman Raskin, that's so far one of the lost elements of the Mueller report. There's just so much in it. But there are a number of spots in the report where it is, in effect, recommending new laws so that they would have had different legal frameworks that they were looking at for this activity.
Yes, and you know, one of the things we need to do is to get foreign money out of our elections. Citizens United opened up the floodgates to foreign money to come pouring in through corporations. We've got legislation called Get Foreign Money Out, which attempts to close that loophole. But we also need to strengthen generally the right to vote in the country. We need to strengthen the defenses of the state electoral systems, which got hacked in the 2016 election. And there was actually some tantalizing evidence offered in the report that had not been public before about intrusions into, you know, state computer election systems. So that's a very serious problem. You know, look, the Democrats are taking this on. We haven't been waiting around. We obviously have a very strong positive program that we're fighting for. We just reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. We've passed the toughest gun safety legislation in more than a decade, which we're waiting on the Republicans to take up. And we passed H.R. 1, which is a whole democracy reform, vote strengthening package where we eliminate gerrymandering and we move to independent voting boards in every state in the union so we can have some fair redistricting and real democratic opportunity. So these are things that we've got to do on the positive side, even while we're defending the Constitution and the rule of law against the most lawless White House of our lifetime. So that's the challenge for the party as a caucus, is to stay on the positive high road at the same time that we're defending the rule of law.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congressman Eric